You can't just wheel in here looking for handouts." Derek Martinez's voice cut through Meridian Tower's refined lobby like a blade through silk. The building manager stormed across the polished floor toward James Washington, who had just navigated his wheelchair through the revolving door with quiet dignity. Early morning commuters froze mid-stride, coffee cups suspended halfway to their lips as 20 years of Derek's unchecked authority radiated from his aggressive posture. His face twisted with the kind of disgust usually reserved for stepping in something unpleasant. None of them noticed how James's seemingly casual glance catalogued every security camera, how his weathered hands adjusted his briefcase with movements too precise for someone truly lost, how his eyes carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect in boardrooms and battlefields alike. James brought his wheelchair to a gentle stop, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Handouts? That's quite an interesting assumption, Derek." The use of his name hit Derek like ice water. His face reddened as he fumbled for his radio, veins bulging at his temples. "Don't get smart with me. How do you even know my name?" James withdrew a worn leather folder from his briefcase, tapping it thoughtfully against his armrest. The morning light caught the faded gold embossing on its cover. "You know, Derek, I've been meaning to review some policies around here." Something in his tone should have warned them all. "Before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today and if you're enjoying these stories. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss." Derek plants himself directly in James's path like a human barricade, his arms crossed over his chest in a display of authority that would be laughable if it weren't so dangerous. The morning light streaming through the windows illuminates his face, revealing the petty cruelty that 20 years of unchecked power has etched into every line. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once." Derek begins, his voice dripping with the condescension of someone who mistakes position for power. "I run this building, have for 20 years. 20 years of keeping riffraff out, maintaining standards, ensuring that only the right kind of people have access to these premises." He gestures around the lobby as if he personally laid every marble tile, as if his name were carved into the cornerstone instead of gathering dust on a middle management nameplate. "This isn't some public housing project or community center where anyone can just roll in off the street." James maintains perfect stillness, his hands resting calmly on his wheelchair's armrests. But his eyes, sharp, intelligent, experienced, never leave Derek's face. They're the eyes of someone who has seen real authority, real power, and recognizes the hollow imitation standing before him. Derek pulls out his radio with the flourish of someone drawing a weapon. "Security to the main lobby. We have a Code 7 situation down here." The static crackles like electricity in the tense air. "Maybe you should try the community center down the street. They've got wheelchair ramps and probably serve free lunch, too." The casual cruelty of the comment draws gasps from several early-arriving office workers. A woman in an expensive suit pauses mid-stride, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. A young man in horn-rimmed glasses pulls out his phone, instinctively sensing that something significant is unfolding. James never raises his voice, never breaks eye contact, never shows even a flicker of the anger that would be justified. Instead, he simply pulls out a small leather notebook and begins writing. His pen moves with the practiced precision of someone accustomed to documenting important details. "Derek Martinez," James says aloud as he writes, his pronunciation careful and deliberate. "That's Martinez, correct? With an EZ at the end?" The question sends a visible shiver through Derek's confidence. How does this stranger know not just his name, but the correct spelling? The doubt lasts only a moment before arrogance reasserts itself. Two security guards emerge from the elevator bank, their footsteps echoing across the polished floor in perfect synchronization. But something strange happens when they see James. The younger guard, Davis according to his nameplate, stops mid-stride. The older guard, Rodriguez, shifts uncomfortably, recognition flickering across his weathered face like lightning illuminating a storm cloud. "Finally!" Derek exclaims, turning towards them with visible relief. "Get this guy out of here before he starts bothering the actual tenants. Professional building, professional standards." But neither guard moves. They stand frozen in a tableau of uncertainty, their eyes moving between Derek's expectant face and James's calm composure. The morning rush is beginning in earnest now, bringing a steady stream of suits and briefcases through the revolving door. Several people have stopped to watch the confrontation, forming a loose semicircle of witnesses. "Well?" Derek demands, his voice rising with each word. "Are you going to do your jobs or not?" "Sir," the older guard says carefully, his voice carrying the weight of someone who suspects he's walking into a minefield. "Maybe we should—" "Maybe nothing." Derek cuts him off with the sharp crack of absolute authority. "I give the orders here. I sign your paychecks. I determine who belongs in this building and who doesn't." He turns back to James with renewed venom, feeding off what he perceives as support from his subordinates. "As for you, I'm calling the police. Criminal trespassing in a private commercial building? That's a real charge with real consequences." James closes his notebook with a soft snap that somehow carries more authority than Derek's shouting. "By all means, when you call, ask specifically for Officer Johnson. Tell him James Washington is here to review his property." The words "his property" land like stones thrown into still water, sending ripples of confusion across Derek's features. But confusion quickly transforms back into rage, because admitting uncertainty would mean admitting weakness. "I don't care if you think you know people." Derek snarls. "I don't care what kind of connections you claim to have. You're not fooling anyone with your pressed suit and fancy briefcase. We all know what this is really about." Behind the polished reception desk, the morning supervisor leans over to whisper urgently to her colleague. "Wait, doesn't he look familiar? Isn't that—" But Derek's booming voice drowns out her words like thunder overwhelming a whisper. James wheels himself towards the building directory mounted on the far wall, studying it with the careful attention of someone reading sheet music. The bronze letters gleam under the lobby's carefully designed lighting as his fingers trace certain entries. Washington Property Management, Washington Construction Historical Archives, Washington Foundation for Equal Access. The elderly janitor emerges from the service elevator, pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies and fresh flowers for the lobby's arrangements. When Rodriguez spots James, his weathered face breaks into a genuine smile that transforms his entire appearance from invisible servant to valued colleague. "Good morning, Mr. Washington," Rodriguez says quietly, his voice carrying deep respect and genuine warmth. "It's wonderful to see you back in the building, sir." Derek whirls around as if he's been struck. "Don't encourage him, Rodriguez. He's not supposed to be here. How many times do I have to explain proper security protocols?" Rodriguez's smile fades, but his eyes remain kind as they move between Derek's fury and James's calm dignity. 20 years of watching Derek's behavior has taught him to recognize the difference between authority and authoritarianism. James wheels over to the building's cornerstone, a massive granite block embedded in the wall near the elevator bank. His fingers trace the inscription etched into the stone with the reverence of someone touching a family heirloom. Meridian Tower, 1987. Washington Construction Company. The bronze plaque mounted below carries more detail. In memory of Samuel Washington, builder of dreams, creator of opportunities, father of progress. A small American flag sits in a holder beside the plaque, its colors bright against the dark stone. Interesting historical reading. Derek sneers, following James's gaze with the contempt of someone who has never built anything more significant than his own inflated ego. Let me guess, you're going to claim some connection to the construction company? Maybe say your great-uncle worked here or something? James's hand moves instinctively to the small service pin on his lapel, two purple hearts gleaming against the dark fabric of his suit. But he says nothing, simply continues his examination of his grandfather's memorial. Derek's patience evaporates completely like water on hot pavement. He moves behind James's wheelchair and grabs the handles with both hands, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. "That's it!" Derek roars, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "I said out, and I meant out, before I have you arrested for disturbing the peace, trespassing, and whatever other charges I can think of." The lobby falls silent, except for the whisper of elevator doors and the distant hum of morning traffic filtering through the thick glass. Every conversation stops. Every phone points towards the confrontation. Even the security guards step forward, unsure whether to intervene, but recognizing that something significant is happening. James grips his wheelchair's push rims, his muscles flexing as he stops Derek's attempt to move him. When he speaks, his voice remains steady, but something steel-hard enters his tone, the voice of someone who commanded troops in combat zones. "Derek, I strongly suggest you remove your hands from my chair and reconsider your entire approach to this situation. And I suggest you reconsider yours." Derek shoots back, his face now purple with rage and exertion. "This is my building, my rules, my authority. You don't belong here, and everyone with eyes can see why." The words echo off the marble walls, captured by a dozen phones, witnessed by dozens of people. In the span of 15 minutes, Derek Martinez has revealed the full ugliness of his character, while James Washington has revealed nothing at all about his true identity. But that's about to change in ways that will destroy one man's career and transform an entire building's culture. Derek's hands tighten on the wheelchair handles with white-knuckled desperation, his face contorted into a mask of rage that reveals decades of hidden prejudice finally brought into the light. The morning crowd has swelled to nearly 40 people, forming an irregular circle around the confrontation like spectators at a gladiatorial contest. Office workers pause with their coffee and briefcases, their faces showing a mixture of horror and fascination. A few brave souls pull out phones to record, sensing that they're witnessing something that will be talked about for years. The morning light streaming through the windows creates a natural spotlight on the unfolding drama. "I said, get out!" Derek roars, his voice cracking with the strain of absolute fury. Spittle flies from his lips as he attempts to physically wheel James toward the exit. "I don't care if you're homeless, disabled, or whatever sob story you're trying to sell. This is a respectable building for respectable people." But James plants his hands firmly on his wheelchair's push rims, engaging the brakes with a decisive click that sounds like a gavel falling in a courtroom. His upper body strength, developed through years of navigating the world from a wheelchair and maintained through discipline, proves more than adequate to resist Derek's clumsy attempts at forced removal. "Remove your hands from my chair immediately," James says, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed by colonels and congressmen alike. But Derek has passed beyond the reach of reason, into the red zone of absolute rage. "You don't give me orders!" Derek screams, his voice echoing off the marble walls like thunder in a canyon. "I've been managing this building since before you were probably even born. 20 years of dealing with people exactly like you!" A young professional in a sharp charcoal suit steps forward from the crowd, her face flushed with indignation. "Excuse me, sir, but this is completely inappropriate. You can't just physically assault someone because— Mind your own business, lady." Derek snaps without taking his eyes off James, his attention laser-focused on his perceived enemy. "Unless you want to be escorted out of here too, I don't care how expensive your suit is." An elderly woman clutches her pearl necklace, her voice shaking with outrage. "Someone needs to call the police right now. This is assault and battery in front of witnesses." "I am calling the police!" Derek shouts back. "To have this trespasser arrested and charged with criminal trespass, disturbing the peace, and fraud." But Derek is beyond caring about witnesses or consequences now, drunk on 20 years of unchecked power and the intoxicating belief that his authority is absolute within these marble walls. 20 years I've kept this place clean and professional. 20 years of dealing with people trying to take advantage, trying to scam their way into places they don't belong. James reaches into his briefcase with movements as calm and deliberate as a surgeon selecting instruments. His composure under pressure reveals years of military training, boardroom negotiations, and the quiet confidence that comes from genuine authority rather than borrowed power. He pulls out a cream-colored business card, the card stock thick and expensive between his fingers. The morning light catches the embossed lettering as he extends it toward the younger security guard. "Officer Davis," James says, reading the nameplate with the careful precision of someone who makes it a point to know the names of everyone around him. "Would you please call this number and verify my identity?" Davis takes the card with hands that tremble slightly, his eyes widening as he reads the elegant script. "Washington Property Management, James Washington, Chief Executive Officer." Below the name, an address that exactly matches the building they're standing in, along with a phone number and email that clearly indicate serious business credentials. "I don't care what fake business card you printed at Kinko's." Derek interrupts, his voice reaching a fever pitch that causes several onlookers to step back involuntarily. "You people always have some elaborate scheme, some way to try and guilt honest working folks into giving you what you want." The phrase "you people" hangs in the air like a toxic cloud, drawing audible gasps from several witnesses. The recording phones multiply as people realize they're documenting something that will have serious consequences. Derek has crossed a line that everyone recognizes except himself. A middle-aged businessman shakes his head in disgust. "Man, that's just wrong on every level." A young intern whispers to her colleague, "Did he really just say 'you people' in 2025? But Derek is too consumed with his own righteousness to notice the shift in crowd sentiment. He sees only validation in the audience, mistaking attention for approval. In a fit of pure rage, he kicks over James's briefcase. The leather case tumbles across the marble floor, its contents scattering like autumn leaves in a strong wind. Building blueprints unfurl across the polished stone. Property deeds flutter and settle in a wide arc around James's wheelchair. Financial documents and architectural photographs spread in a fan pattern that tells the story of a business empire built over decades. "Oops," Derek says with mock concern, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Better clean up your mess before someone important sees all your fake paperwork." The scattered documents tell their own story to anyone with eyes to see. Construction permits dating back to the 1980s. Property tax records showing millions in assessed value. architectural drawings signed by Samuel Washington and bearing the seal of Washington Construction Company. Photographs of groundbreaking ceremonies and ribbon cuttings, showing a proud black family building the foundation of what would become a downtown empire. James doesn't flinch at the deliberate humiliation. Instead, he begins collecting the scattered papers with methodical precision, his dignity intact despite Derek's best efforts to destroy it. Each document is carefully examined and properly arranged, as if he's organizing evidence for a trial. Security guard Davis dials the number on the business card with trembling fingers, his conversation brief and whispered. When he hangs up, his face has gone completely pale, as if he's just received news of a natural disaster. "Sir." Davis approaches Derek with the careful steps of someone walking through a minefield. "We really need to talk. Right now." Derek waves him off dismissively, still riding high on his own perceived authority. "Handle the trespasser first. I want him removed from the premises before our 10 o'clock tenant meeting starts. This kind of disruption is exactly what gives buildings a bad reputation." Rodriguez the janitor has been watching from the elevator bank, his weathered face creased with growing concern. 40 years of cleaning these floors has given him a perspective that Derek lacks. He's seen real power and recognizes authentic authority when he encounters it. "Mr. Martinez." Rodriguez steps forward carefully, his voice respectful but urgent. "Perhaps you should listen to what Officer Davis has to say." "Shut up, Rodriguez!" Derek explodes, whirling on the elderly man with vicious intensity. "One more word out of you and I'll call immigration to check your status. See how helpful you feel when ICE comes knocking on your door." The threat hangs in the air like smoke from a fire, revealing not just prejudice, but calculated cruelty. Several onlookers exchange horrified glances, recognizing that Derek has just threatened an elderly employee whose only crime was showing basic human decency. James finishes collecting his papers, arranging them neatly in his leather folder with the same care a general might use to organize battle plans. When he looks up at Derek, his eyes carry the weight of someone who has seen war zones and boardrooms, homeless shelters and penthouse offices. "Last chance, Derek," James says quietly, his voice carrying the finality of a judge about to pass sentence. "Or what?" Derek laughs, a sound like breaking glass in an empty house. "You'll sue me with your legal aid lawyer, file a complaint with your community organizer friends, report me to the NAACP. Each word drips with the kind of venom that reveals a lifetime of carefully concealed hatred, finally given permission to emerge into the light. James nods slowly, as if Derek has just answered a question he didn't know he was asking. The gesture carries the weight of final judgment, the moment when mercy is offered and refused. "I see," James says with the sad finality of someone recognizing a tragedy that could have been avoided. "Okay then." Behind the reception desk, the morning supervisor is making frantic phone calls, her voice urgent and worried. In the elevator bank, additional security personnel have appeared, all of them looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding in their lobby. The morning shift of building maintenance workers has gathered near the service entrance, their faces showing a mixture of embarrassment and anger at Derek's behavior. They know Rodriguez, respect him, and watching him be threatened has stirred something dangerous in their collective mood. But Derek sees none of it. He's too intoxicated by his own performance, too convinced of his righteousness to notice that his world is about to collapse around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. The elevator dings with the sound of approaching judgment. The polished steel doors slide open like curtains, rising on the final act of a tragedy. And everything changes. Sarah Chen steps out of the elevator like justice personified. her Louboutin heels clicking across the marble with the precision of a military march. As head of operations for Washington Property Management, she commands instant respect from every employee in every building under the company's management. Today, her usually composed face is flushed with barely controlled fury. 3 additional security personnel follow in her wake, along with the building's assistant manager, head of legal affairs, and a woman in an expensive suit who carries herself with the authority of serious corporate power. The morning lobby suddenly feels like a courtroom where judgment is about to be rendered. "Finally," Derek exclaims, turning toward the approaching group with visible relief flooding his features. "Someone with real authority. Sarah, thank God you're here. Get this vagrant out of here before he causes any more trouble or disrupts our tenant relationships." Sarah doesn't even acknowledge Derek's existence. She walks directly to James, her expression shifting from controlled fury to deep, genuine concern. Her voice, when she speaks, carries the weight of someone addressing a person of significant importance. "Mr. Washington," she says, her words heavy with remorse that seems to fill the entire lobby. "I am so profoundly, deeply sorry for what has happened here this morning." The words hit Derek like a physical blow to the solar plexus. His triumphant smile begins to crack like ice under pressure. "Mr. Washington, what did you call him?" Sarah turns toward Derek now, and her expression could freeze hellfire itself. When she speaks, her voice carries the authority of someone who signs paychecks and makes career-ending decisions. "Derek Martinez," she says, each word carefully enunciated. "Meet James Washington." She pauses, letting the name sink into Derek's consciousness like acid eating through metal. The man who owns this building. The lobby falls completely silent except for the whisper of air conditioning and the distant rumble of traffic 15 floors below. Derek's face drains of color like water flowing from a broken dam, leaving him pale and shaking. That's impossible," Derek stammers, his voice barely above a whisper. He's in a wheelchair. He looks like... The sentence dies unfinished, the ugly truth hanging in the air like smoke from a fire. "Like what exactly, Derek?" Sarah's voice could cut through steel plating. "Mr. James Washington owns this building, along with 12 others in the downtown district. His family's construction company, Washington Construction, built half this neighborhood in the 1960s when black contractors faced systematic exclusion from major projects." James speaks quietly, his voice carrying the weight of family history and personal legacy. "My grandfather's company, actually. Samuel Washington Construction. He broke ground on this building when I was still learning to ride a bicycle." Derek's hands shake visibly as the full magnitude of his error crashes over him like a tsunami. But that can't be... You're... What am I, Derek?" James asks with gentle patience, giving Derek one final opportunity to reveal whatever humanity might remain beneath the prejudice. Sarah continues her devastating revelation like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "Mr. Washington graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School before serving 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, where he was awarded 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for valor." James raises his hand slightly, uncomfortable with praise for his military service. "Sarah, my service record isn't relevant to today's discussion." "It's absolutely relevant, sir," Sarah responds with passionate conviction. "This man has spent the last 30 minutes systematically humiliating you, threatening our employees, and revealing prejudices that have no place in any civilized workplace, let alone in one of your buildings." She pulls out her tablet, swiping through documents with the practiced efficiency of someone who has built her career on thorough preparation. Derek, your employment file makes for fascinating reading. 6 formal discrimination complaints filed against you in just the past 2 years. Complaints that were apparently buried by your previous supervisor, who has since been terminated for ethics violations. Derek's knees buckle slightly, forcing him to grab the edge of a marble planter for support. Those were just misunderstandings, cultural differences. A Hispanic family from El Salvador looking for their immigration attorney's office. Sarah reads from her screen with clinical precision. An elderly Korean war veteran trying to visit his son's accounting firm. A young black mother interviewing for a position with our financial consultants. All asked to leave by you, Derek. All treated with the same contempt you've shown Mr. Washington today. James listens to each account with growing sadness rather than anger, his notebook appearing once again as he begins documenting the scope of the problem. How many others have there been, Sarah? We're still investigating, sir, but the pattern is unmistakable. 20 years of incidents, complaints, and what can only be described as systematic discrimination. The legal affairs representative steps forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who deals with civil rights violations professionally. Mr. Washington, we have security footage going back 5 years that shows a clear pattern of harassment targeting people of color, elderly individuals, and anyone Derek perceived as somehow unworthy of accessing this building. The security footage plays on Sarah's tablet, Derek's voice echoing from the tiny speakers with damning clarity. You people always have some angle. The recorded words sound even uglier when played back in the marble-walled silence. 20 years. Derek whispers, as if speaking to himself rather than the gathered crowd. I've worked here faithfully for 20 years. 20 years of this. James says sadly, holding up his notebook filled with the morning's observations. 20 years of making people feel unwelcome in buildings that were meant to serve the entire community. 20 years of turning away potential tenants, clients, and visitors based solely on the color of their skin or their perceived social status. Sarah's investigation has revealed the depth of systematic failure that enabled Derek's behavior. Sir, we've discovered that multiple discrimination complaints were filed against Derek over the years, but they were consistently downplayed or buried entirely by his previous supervisor, who apparently shared his prejudices. Systematic institutional failure, James observes, making careful notes about policy changes that will need to be implemented. Derek, this isn't just about your personal prejudices. This is about a culture that allowed and enabled those prejudices to flourish unchecked. The head of legal affairs pulls up additional documentation on her laptop. Mr. Washington, we've also discovered that Derek's behavior may have cost the company significant rental income. Several potential high-value tenants were turned away at the door and never had the opportunity to submit applications. Derek tries one final desperate gambit, his voice cracking with panic. I was protecting the building. It's my job to maintain security and ensure that only legitimate business is conducted on the premises. Your job, Sarah interrupts with ice-cold precision, was to provide professional, courteous service to every person who entered this lobby. Your job was to represent the values and reputation of this company and the Washington family legacy. James wheels himself back to the cornerstone, where his grandfather's memorial plaque gleams in the morning light. His hand rests on the bronze, with the reverence of someone touching a family Bible. This building was supposed to be a symbol of progress, Derek. My grandfather built it during a time when black contractors and business owners faced barriers at every turn. He succeeded not by keeping people out, but by opening doors that had been closed to entire communities. The morning light streaming through the windows seems brighter now, illuminating the scene with crystalline clarity that reveals truth in all its stark beauty and ugly reality. The crowd of onlookers has grown to include nearly every employee on the early shift, all of them silent witnesses to the unfolding of justice. "Mr. Washington," Sarah asks with formal respect, "what would you like us to do about this situation?" James looks at Derek for a long moment, seeing not an enemy to be destroyed, but a system failure that needs to be corrected. When he speaks, his voice carries the wisdom of someone who has learned that true power lies not in punishment, but in transformation. "What I've always done when confronted with failing systems, Sarah. We identify the problems, we fix the underlying causes, and we build something better." Derek's legs give out completely, sending him crashing to his knees on the cold marble floor like a supplicant begging for mercy from an unforgiving God. His 20-year career dissolves before his eyes like sand in an hourglass, each grain representing a moment of unchecked prejudice that has finally reached its inevitable conclusion. "Mr. Washington, please." Derek's voice cracks with desperation, his words echoing off the marble walls like the pleading of a man facing execution. "I didn't know who you were. I was just doing my job, protecting the building like I was trained to do when I first started here." James studies Derek's face with the careful attention of a surgeon examining a patient, searching for any sign of genuine remorse beneath the layers of self-preservation and panic. "Protecting the building from whom, exactly, Derek? From potential tenants who might contribute to our success? From visitors conducting legitimate business? From American citizens exercising their right to access public commercial spaces?" Each question lands like a hammer blow against Derek's crumbling defenses. His mouth opens and closes like a fish gasping for air, but no coherent justification emerges. The ugly truth of his prejudices stands naked under the lobby's bright lights, impossible to deny or disguise. Sarah pulls up Derek's complete employment record on her tablet, scrolling through years of incident reports that paint a devastating picture of systematic discrimination. The harassment of that Hispanic family last month wasn't an isolated incident, Derek. The elderly Asian gentleman you humiliated in March, the young black mother you made cry in front of her children in February. How many people, Derek? James asks quietly, his voice carrying the weight of moral authority. How many families did you humiliate? How many professionals did you turn away from legitimate business meetings? How many elderly people did you disrespect simply because they didn't match your mental image of who belongs in this building? The security footage tells its own damning story across multiple screens throughout the lobby. Derek's pattern of discrimination plays out like a horror movie, each incident more appalling than the last. His excuses grow weaker with each revelation, crumbling under the weight of documented evidence. Rodriguez steps forward, his weathered face showing a mixture of sadness and vindication. "Mr. Washington, I want to thank you for what you're doing. Derek has been treating people this way for years. We all knew it was wrong, but we didn't know how to stop it without losing our jobs." "You shouldn't have had to stop it, Rodriguez," James replies with genuine warmth and respect. "That represents a failure of leadership and institutional oversight, and I take full responsibility for allowing these conditions to persist." Derek seizes on what he perceives as an opening, grasping desperately at his final lifeline. "Yes, exactly. It wasn't just me. The whole system was set up this way. I was following established procedures, doing what I was taught." "No, Derek," Sarah interrupts with clinical precision. We've reviewed all training materials, policy manuals, and procedural guidelines. Nothing in our documentation authorizes or encourages discriminatory behavior. This was your personal choice, repeated hundreds of times over 20 years. The building's assistant manager steps forward with additional documentation. Sir, our investigation has revealed that Derek actively ignored company diversity training, skipped mandatory harassment prevention seminars, and consistently rated poorly on cultural sensitivity evaluations. I have a family, Derek pleads, tears streaming down his face as the full magnitude of his situation becomes clear. A mortgage, kids in college, car payments. Please, Mr. Washington, I can change. I can learn. I'll do anything. Sensitivity training, community service, work without pay for a month. James nods slowly, his expression showing the sadness of someone who recognizes a tragedy that could have been prevented. I'm sure you do have a family, Derek. I want you to consider something. How many other families did you impact with your behavior? The mother you humiliated in front of her children, teaching them that people like Derek exist in positions of power. The grandfather you dismissed in front of his grandson, showing that young man what disrespect looks like. Sarah coordinates Derek's termination with military efficiency, each step calculated to ensure complete removal from the company's operations. Derek Martinez, you are terminated from Washington Property Management, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. There will be no severance package, no positive references, and no consideration for future employment with any Washington company. Wait! Derek scrambles to his feet, his face wild with panic. You can't destroy my entire career over one mistake. Everyone deserves a second chance. One mistake? Sarah's voice rises with controlled fury. Derek, we have documented evidence of discriminatory behavior spanning your entire employment here. This wasn't one mistake. This was a deliberate pattern of abuse enabled by your position of authority. The legal affairs representative adds her voice to the proceedings. Mr. Martinez will also be contacting the Property Management Industry Association about your conduct. Other employers should be made aware of your history before making hiring decisions. Derek's face crumbles as he realizes that he's not just losing this job. He's being effectively blacklisted from his entire profession. 20 years of experience rendered worthless by 20 minutes of exposed prejudice. James raises his hand for attention, his voice carrying the authority of someone making an important policy announcement. This termination isn't about revenge or punishment, Derek. It's about ensuring that what happened to me this morning never happens to anyone else. Not in this building, not in any building we manage. The morning shift of building maintenance workers has gathered to watch Derek's removal, their faces showing a mixture of relief and vindication. They've worked alongside Rodriguez for years, respected him, and watching him be threatened has stirred something powerful in their collective conscience. Sarah signals to security, who move to flank Derek like an honor guard in reverse. Derek, you'll be escorted out through the same door you tried to force Mr. Washington through. Your personal belongings will be boxed and mailed to your home address. This is a witch hunt! Derek shouts desperately as security takes his arms. I'll sue for wrongful termination. I'll file complaints with the labor board. I'll contact the media about discrimination against white employees. James wheels himself closer to Derek, his voice gentle but firm. Derek, I genuinely hope you learn something from this experience. I hope you use this as an opportunity to examine your attitudes and maybe become the kind of person your family can be truly proud of. As security escorts Derek towards the exit, he passes the cornerstone where his career died. Samuel Washington's memorial plaque gleams in the morning light, a reminder that true legacy comes from building bridges between communities, not walls around privilege. The lobby erupts in scattered applause as Derek disappears through the revolving door, but James raises his hand for silence. This is just the beginning of necessary changes. Derek was a symptom of larger institutional problems that we need to address systematically. Rodriguez approaches James with tears in his eyes. Sir, in 40 years of working in buildings like this, I've never seen anyone stand up the way you did today. Thank you for giving us all our dignity back. James's grandfather's watch ticks steadily against his chest, marking time for the healing work that lies ahead. James wheels himself to the center of the lobby, the morning light casting long shadows across the marble floor, like the hands of a clock marking a new era. The crowd of witnesses has grown to include nearly every employee on the early shifts, their faces showing a mixture of shame for what they've witnessed and hope for what might come next. What happened here today represents a complete failure of institutional leadership. James begins, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has addressed corporate boards and military commanders. Derek's behavior wasn't an aberration. It was the predictable result of systems that tolerated and enabled discrimination. Sarah steps forward with her tablet ready, but James waves her off. This moment requires speaking from the heart, drawing on reserves of wisdom earned through military service, business success, and personal struggle. Effective immediately, we're implementing comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion training for every employee in every building we manage. Not a token gesture or one-day seminar, but ongoing education about unconscious bias, cultural competency, and the kind of respectful service that honors every person who enters our buildings. The announcement sends murmurs of approval through the crowd. This isn't just policy change. It's a complete cultural transformation backed by the moral authority of someone who has earned the right to demand better. We're also establishing an independent Office of Diversity and Inclusion with anonymous reporting mechanisms for discrimination incidents and investigations conducted by trained professionals from outside our company structure. Rodriguez raises his weathered hand tentatively, his voice carrying decades of quiet observation. Mr. Washington, what about managers like Derek's supervisor? The people who covered up complaints and protected discriminatory behavior? James nods approvingly at the insightful question. Excellent point, Rodriguez. Enabling discrimination is as serious as committing it. We'll be conducting a complete audit of our management practices across all properties, with particular attention to how complaints have been handled historically. The assistant manager steps forward with architectural plans and budget projections displayed on her laptop. Sir, should I brief everyone on the accessibility improvements and community outreach programs you've been developing? Please do, Jennifer. The plans reveal James's broader vision, retrofitting every Washington-managed building with state-of-the-art accessibility features that go far beyond legal requirements. Wheelchair ramps become elegant architectural elements. Elevators include braille and audio announcements in multiple languages. Sensory-friendly spaces accommodate people with autism and other neurological differences. This is all part of the Washington Initiative for Equal Access. James explains, his voice warming as he describes his life's work. A foundation I established to ensure that physical, economic, and social barriers never prevent anyone from pursuing opportunities that might change their lives. A young intern raises her hand nervously, her voice trembling with the uncertainty of someone speaking truth to power. Mr. Washington, how do we make sure this actually changes things long-term? How do we prevent more people like Derek from rising to positions where they can hurt others? James smiles at the question, seeing in her face the future he's trying to build. By understanding that Derek wasn't born with those prejudices, he learned them somewhere, absorbed them from a culture that taught him to see some people as more worthy than others. If those attitudes can be learned, they can also be unlearned. Sarah reports that the morning's incident has already begun generating positive ripple effects throughout the industry. Sir, we've received calls from 4 other property management companies asking about our new policies. The mayor's office wants to discuss city-wide implementation of similar programs. The mayor's business advisory council will be meeting next week. James adds, this incident will serve as a case study for developing municipal anti-discrimination policies. The morning's transformation extends beyond policy to the building's very atmosphere. Employees who once hurried past Rodriguez now stop to engage him in conversation, asking about his family and showing genuine interest in his well-being. Security guards greet every visitor with authentic warmth rather than suspicious evaluation. My grandfather built this building during an era when black contractors faced systematic exclusion from major construction projects. James continues, his hand resting on Samuel Washington's memorial plaque. He succeeded not by accepting barriers as permanent, but by building bridges that connected separated communities. The Washington Foundation's scope extends far beyond accessibility improvements. Scholarship programs provide educational opportunities for underrepresented students studying business, construction, and urban planning. Mentorship networks connect experienced professionals with young people facing systemic barriers similar to those Samuel Washington overcame in the 1960s. The Community Forum program will transform our ground floor spaces into venues where tenants, neighbors, and community leaders can gather monthly to discuss local issues and collaborative solutions. Sarah explains, displaying architectural renderings of flexible meeting spaces designed for maximum accessibility and comfort. But the most important change, James concludes, his voice carrying the weight of lived experience, happens in individual hearts and minds. Every person in this lobby has the power to make someone feel welcome or unwelcome, valued or dismissed, included or excluded. That's not a policy decision. That's a character choice made fresh every single day. The transformation is already visible in the faces around him. The morning's ugly confrontation has become a catalyst for conversations about privilege, prejudice, and the responsibility that comes with any form of power or authority. Rodriguez approaches after the crowd begins to disperse, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Mr. Washington, in 40 years of working in buildings like this, I never thought I'd see the day when someone like Derek would face real consequences for his behavior. And in 40 more years, Rodriguez, I hope incidents like today's become impossible because we've built systems strong enough to prevent them. James replies. The young intern lingers, clearly wanting to ask another question. James wheels over to her, recognizing the importance of encouraging the next generation of leaders. You wanted to ask something else. He prompts gently. Do you think Derek will actually learn anything from this? Or will he just become more bitter and blame everyone else for his problems? James considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. I honestly don't know. But even if Derek never learns, everyone who witnessed today's events will carry the lesson forward. That's how real institutional change happens. One person, one choice, one moment of courage at a time. His grandfather's watch continues its steady ticking, marking time for a future where dignity and respect aren't privileges to be earned, but rights to be protected. The marble lobby of Meridian Tower stands transformed in the afternoon light, its polished surfaces reflecting not just images, but possibilities. James Washington's confrontation with Derek Martinez lasted 30 minutes, but its implications will ripple through the property management industry for years to come. You've witnessed Derek's spectacular downfall and James's graceful response. You've seen how 20 years of unchecked discrimination crumbled in the face of documented truth and moral authority. But this story doesn't end with Derek's termination or James's policy announcements. It ends with what you choose to do next every single day, in office lobbies and shopping centers, in schools and government buildings, in hospitals and hotels. Someone faces their own Derek moment. Someone encounters prejudice masquerading as policy, discrimination disguised as security protocols, hatred hiding behind helpful smiles and professional courtesy. The uncomfortable truth is that Derek Martinez exists in every industry, every institution, every community, where power meets prejudice and finds permission to flourish. He's the manager who questions minority employees' credentials more rigorously than their white colleagues. He's the supervisor who interprets identical behavior differently depending on the performer's race or gender. He's the authority figure who sees threat where others see opportunity. But Derek isn't the only character in this story. You also witnessed Sarah Chen's decisive leadership, Rodriguez's quiet dignity, and the security guard's growing recognition that something was fundamentally wrong. You saw office workers pull out phones to document injustice, and you watched an intern find courage to ask the hard questions about systemic change. Which character will you choose to be when your moment comes? James Washington didn't reveal his identity immediately because he wanted to see how Derek would treat someone he perceived as powerless. The test revealed Derek's true character, stripped of pretense and professional facade. But here's the crucial insight. Everyone deserves to be treated with the dignity James ultimately received, regardless of whether they own the building or simply need to use the bathroom. Your sphere of influence may not include marble lobbies and million-dollar properties, but it includes somewhere. You have colleagues who look to you for leadership, neighbors who observe your behavior, family members who learn from your example. You have the power to interrupt prejudice when you witness it, to question assumptions that others accept without examination. The Washington Initiative for Equal Access needs allies in every community, every workplace, every institution where barriers still exist. You can support businesses that demonstrate inclusive practices. You can speak up when witnessing discrimination, even when it's uncomfortable or socially awkward. You can mentor someone facing obstacles you've never had to navigate. But most importantly, you can examine your own assumptions about who belongs where and why. You can ask yourself whether your comfort with certain people and discomfort with others reflects objective reality or inherited prejudice. You can choose to see potential where others see problems, opportunity where others see threat. The next James Washington might be sitting in the wheelchair next to you at the airport, waiting with the same patience that comes from understanding that dignity doesn't depend on other people's recognition. The next Derek Martinez might be looking in the mirror tomorrow morning, choosing whether to question someone's presence based on appearance rather than evidence. Every building started with someone's architectural vision. Every transformed community began with one person's courage to challenge systems that weren't serving everyone equally. James didn't just own that building. He rebuilt what it represented, transformed what it meant, and created a model that other property owners are already adopting. Your blueprint for change doesn't require millions of dollars or corporate authority. It requires the courage to see clearly, speak truthfully, and act consistently with your stated values, even when it's difficult or unpopular. The conversations happening in that marble lobby will continue in conference rooms and break rooms across the country. The questions that young intern asked will be asked by students and employees who recognize that passive observation isn't enough when fundamental human dignity is at stake. Your Derek moment is approaching faster than you think. Your opportunity to demonstrate James's grace under pressure awaits. Your chance to build bridges instead of walls, to open doors instead of closing them, to include instead of exclude presence itself every single day in ways both large and small. Don't just occupy your space. Transform it with intention and purpose. Don't just witness injustice. Interrupt it with courage and compassion. Don't just hope for change. Create it through consistent action and moral leadership. The blueprint for justice isn't complex. Treat every person with the dignity you'd want for yourself and your family. Question every assumption that divides rather than unites. Challenge every barrier that keeps people apart instead of bringing them together. Your platform awaits. Your moment of choice approaches. Your legacy begins now. What will you build?